They say that in the Midwest, the corn doesn't just grow, it listens. If you've never stood in the middle of a private farm in Ohio at 2 in the morning, you don't know what true silence feels like. It's not the absence of sound, it's a heavy, vibrating pressure that fills your ears, making you pray for a breeze just to break the tension. My name is Elias, and what I'm about to tell you happened in the summer of 2014. I was 20 years old, staying at my family's farmhouse while my parents were away in Florida for their 25th anniversary. I thought I'd enjoy the solitude. No chores, no city noise, just me and the endless gold of the harvest. But the thing about solitude is that it eventually turns into isolation, and isolation is where the mind starts to play tricks, or where it finally starts to see the things that were always there. Our property was bordered by hundreds of acres of corn. By August, the stalks were over 7 feet tall, forming a massive, impenetrable wall just 30 yards from our back porch. You couldn't see through it, you could only see into it, about 2 feet of darkness before the yellow leaves swallowed everything. The first 3 nights were peaceful, but on the 4th night, the wind died down completely. I was sitting on the porch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic shuck, shuck, shuck. It was the sound of dry corn leaves rubbing together. Now, in the wind, that's normal, but there was no wind. The air was like glass. I looked out. The wall of corn was dead still, except for one small patch near the old tractor shed. One single row was swaying as if something tall had just brushed past it. I told myself it was a deer. We had plenty of them. I went inside, locked the door, and didn't think twice about it. The next morning, I went out to the porch with my coffee. About 50 yards into the field, I saw something that hadn't been there before. A scarecrow. Now, my father didn't use scarecrows. He used automated bird distress callers. This thing was crude, a tall wooden cross with a tattered charcoal gray suit draped over it. It had a burlap sack for a head, but no face was painted on it. It was just a blank tan bulb staring toward the house. I called my dad. "Hey, did you put out a new scarecrow before you left?" "A what?" he laughed. "No, Elias. Maybe the neighbors are playing a prank. Just ignore it." But I couldn't, because the next morning, the scarecrow was closer. It was no longer 50 yards away. It was 30. It was now standing right at the edge of the mowed lawn, perfectly aligned with my bedroom window. And it wasn't on a wooden cross anymore. It was leaning slightly forward, as if it were mid-stride. That afternoon, I walked out to it. I wanted to see who was moving it. But as I got closer, the smell hit me. It didn't smell like hay or old clothes. It smelled like wet copper and stagnant water. I reached out to touch the burlap head, but a sudden, violent rustle inside the corn stalks right behind the figure made me jump back. "Who's there?" I yelled. Silence. I grabbed the burlap sack and pulled. It was empty, just an old suit on a frame. I felt like an idiot. I dragged the suit and the sticks to the burn pile and set them on fire. I watched until they were nothing but ash. I felt better. I felt safe. That night, I went to sleep early.
Around 3:15 a.m., I was jolted awake by a sound that made my heart stop. It was a wet, heavy thud against my bedroom window. Thump. I pulled back the curtain. There was no scarecrow, but there was something else. A muddy handprint was smeared across the glass. A large, human-like hand with fingers that were far too long. And in the moonlight, I could see a trail of flattened corn stalks leading from the field straight to my front door.
I grabbed my father's shotgun from the cabinet. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the shells. I went to the front door and checked the lock. It was still latched. I checked the back door. Latched. Then I heard it. From the kitchen. Scrape. 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 It was the sound of a metal chair being dragged across the linoleum floor. I crept toward the kitchen. The barrel of the shotgun led the way. The house was freezing. I could see my breath in the moonlight. I turned the corner and aimed at the kitchen table. It was empty, but the back door, the one I had just checked, was wide open. The screen door was hanging off its hinges, swaying in the midnight breeze. And sitting on the kitchen table was a single fresh ear of corn. It had been peeled back, but instead of yellow kernels, the inside was filled with what looked like human teeth, crudely glued into the cob. I felt a cold sweat break out over my entire body. This wasn't a prank. This was something predatory. I backed away toward the living room, intending to run for the garage in my car. But as I passed the basement door, I heard a voice. It wasn't a human voice. It sounded like the rubbing of dry leaves filtered through a throat full of dirt. It whispered my name. Elias. I turned my flashlight toward the basement stairs. At the bottom, standing in the shadows, was the charcoal gray suit. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled out by something thin, gray, and impossibly tall. Its arms reached all the way down to its knees. It had no face, just a blank, burlap-like skin stretched over a skull with two glowing, milky orbs for eyes. I didn't wait. I fired. The blast of the shotgun echoed through the house, deafening me. The figure didn't fall. It just shredded like paper. It dissolved into a cloud of dry corn husks and dust. I didn't stay to see if it would reform. I sprinted for the garage, jumped into my truck, and didn't even wait for the garage door to fully open. I smashed through the bottom panel and tore down the gravel driveway. As I looked in my rearview mirror, my headlights caught the edge of the cornfield. There weren't just one or two, there were dozens of them. Tall, gray figures in tattered suits, standing in the rows, all watching me drive away. They weren't moving, they were just waiting. I drove until I hit a diner in the next county. I sat there until the sun came up, clutching a coffee cup like a lifeline. When the police went back to the house, they found nothing. No broken screen door, no teeth-filled corn, no charcoal suit. But they did find one thing. My father's shotgun was lying on the kitchen floor. The barrel was stuffed full of dry corn husks, so tightly packed that if I had tried to fire a second shot, the gun would have exploded in my face. I never moved back to that farm. My parents sold it a month later after they came home and found patterns carved into the wood of the outer walls, symbols that no local historian could identify. Now, I live in a high-rise in the city, concrete and glass, no dirt, no plants.
But sometimes when the wind blows through the air vents just right, I hear that dry, scratching sound. Shuck, shuck, shuck. And I remember that in the fields, the corn doesn't just grow, it remembers. Stay out of the fields at night, folks. You never know who's standing in the next row. Home is supposed to be the one place where you can truly be alone. You lock the door, kick off your shoes, and exhale. You assume the walls are solid, the attic is empty, and the only heartbeat in the room is your own. But what if that's a lie? What if, while you're sleeping, someone is watching you from the shadows you never bothered to check? My name is Chloe, and back in 2019, I moved into a studio apartment in an old converted industrial building in downtown Denver. It was beautiful, high ceilings, exposed brick, and a massive walk-in closet. The rent was surprisingly cheap, which should have been my first warning. But I was 23, living on my own for the first time, and I was too excited to be suspicious. For the first few weeks, everything was perfect, but slowly the glitches started. I'd wake up and find my kitchen cabinets slightly ajar. I'm a neat freak. I know for a fact I close them every night. Then it was the smell, a faint, musky scent, like unwashed clothes and old copper would drift through the apartment, usually near the bathroom. I blamed the old building, old pipes, old dust, I told myself. But then things started disappearing, small things. A single slice of bread, a few grapes, a hair tie. I thought I was becoming forgetful due to my new job's stress. I even joked with my friends that I had a poltergeist with a very specific appetite for snacks. I wished it had been a ghost. Ghosts don't have eyes. Ghosts don't have intentions.
The turning point was a Tuesday night. I was lying in bed, the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard a sound that didn't belong. A heavy, rhythmic thump drag, right above my head. I froze. There was no apartment above me. I was on the top floor. Above me was only the crawl space for the HVAC system and the roof. I sat up, clutching my blankets. The sound moved from the ceiling above my bed toward the bathroom. It was slow, deliberate, like someone was crawling on their stomach through a space only a few feet high. I called my landlord the next morning. He came over, looked at the ceiling, poked a few tiles, and shrugged. Probably squirrels, Chloe, or maybe the building's settling. It's 100 years old. He didn't even go up to check. He just left me with a can of peppermint spray and a "don't worry about it" smile. That evening, I was getting ready for a shower. My bathroom was small, dominated by a large, ornate mirror that was bolted to the wall. As I was brushing my teeth, I noticed a smudge on the glass, a smudge of grease right at eye level. I wiped it away, but as I did, the mirror shifted, just a fraction of an inch. I pushed on the frame. It didn't budge, but for a split second, I felt a draft of cold air come behind the glass. It smelled like that musky scent again, but stronger now, much stronger, like someone had been standing right behind that wall, breathing through the cracks. The paranoia was starting to consume me. I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was being watched every time I turned my back. So I did what any modern person would do. I bought a small, motion-activated security camera, the kind that looks like a USB wall charger. I plugged it in on the kitchen counter, pointing toward my bed and the bathroom door. I went to work the next day, my heart racing. I checked the app on my phone every hour, but the feed was quiet. Nothing moved. My apartment sat empty in the afternoon sun. I came home around 6 p.m. Everything looked normal. I sat on my sofa, opened the app, and decided to review the silent footage from the day, just to ease my mind. I scrolled through the empty hours of 1 p.m., 2 p.m., and then at 3:14 p.m., the motion sensor tripped. I watched the screen, my blood turning to ice. The ornate mirror in my bathroom, the one that was supposed to be bolted to the wall, slowly began to swing outward like a door. A man stepped out. He was skeletal, his skin a sickly gray, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in years. He didn't look like a burglar. He looked like a shadow that had taken human form. I watched him walk through my apartment with terrifying familiarity. He went to my fridge, drank milk directly from the carton, and put it back. He sat on my sofa, the very spot I was currently sitting on, and picked up a book I was reading. He smelled it. He licked the corner of a page. But the most horrifying part was what he did next. He walked over to my bed. He didn't steal anything. He just climbed under the covers, curled into a ball, and lay there for 2 hours, right where I sleep. At 5:15 p.m., he heard the sound of my car in the driveway. He jumped up, smoothed the blankets with frantic, shaking hands, and retreated back through the mirror, just seconds before I walked through the front door. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I felt like if I made a sound, the wall would open up again and he'd be there. I grabbed my keys and my phone, and I backed out of the apartment, never taking my eyes off that bathroom door. Once I was in my car with the doors locked, I dialed 911. The police arrived in 6 minutes. I showed them the footage. 4 officers entered the apartment with their guns drawn. I waited outside, shivering. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, one of the officers came out. His face was pale. "You need to come see this," he said. They had pulled the mirror off the wall. Behind it wasn't just a crawl space, it was a nest. The man had cleared out a space between the studs of the wall and the outer brick. He had a sleeping bag made of my old winter coats I thought I'd lost. He had a stack of my mail, letters from my mother, my bank statements, even a photo of me as a child that I kept on my nightstand. But there was more. He had drilled tiny, pin-sized holes in the drywall throughout the apartment. One was behind my headbed, one was in the shower. He hadn't just been living there, he had been documenting me. They found him huddled at the very end of the ventilation shaft, clutching a kitchen knife he'd taken from my drawer. He didn't fight back, he just hissed at them like an animal. He had been living in that wall for 7 months. He knew my routine better than I did. I moved out that night. I lost my deposit. I lost my furniture. I didn't care.
Now, every time I move into a new place, I don't check the locks first. I check the walls. I tap on every mirror. I look for the holes. Because the scariest thing about a home isn't what's outside trying to get in. It's what's already inside, waiting for you to turn off the lights.
If you grow up near the Appalachian Mountains, you are taught a specific set of rules. They aren't written in any book, but they are engraved in the minds of everyone who lives there. Rule number 1, if you think you heard someone call your name from the deep woods, no you didn't. Rule number 2, if you see something that looks human but moves just a little too fast or stands just a little too still, look away. And rule number 3, never, under any circumstances, whistle back. My name is Tyler. In the autumn of 2021, I went on a 5-day backpacking trip with 3 friends, Mark, Sarah, and Leo. We were experienced hikers, and we'd tackled the Appalachian Trail before, but we made the mistake of going off the marked path near a section locals call the Hollow of Echoes. We thought we were finding a hidden paradise. We didn't realize we were entering a hunting ground. The first 2 days were normal, but on the 3rd night, as we sat around our campfire, the forest fell silent. I don't mean quiet, I mean dead. No crickets, no owls, no wind. Then, from the darkness just beyond the reach of our firelight, came a whistle. It was a short, cheerful melody, 3 notes, do, re, mi. Mark laughed. Ha, must be another hiker trying to spook us. He whistled back the same 3 notes. That was our first mistake. The forest didn't respond for a long time. Then, exactly 10 minutes later, the whistle came again. But this time, it wasn't just 3 notes. It was a perfect, pitch-perfect imitation of Mark's laugh. Not a recording. It sounded like Mark was standing right behind a tree 10 feet away, laughing at a joke we hadn't made.
We didn't sleep that night. We sat back to back, flashlights cutting through the mist. The laughter didn't stop. It circled our camp. Sometimes it sounded like Mark, sometimes like Sarah. It would repeat phrases we had said earlier in the day. Sarah whispered, "Did you guys hear that?" 2 seconds later, from the dark, "Did you guys hear that?" in Sarah's exact voice, but with a strange, wet clicking sound at the end of the sentence. By morning, we were exhausted and terrified. We decided to head back to the main trail immediately, but the fog had rolled in, thick and gray, swallowing the landmarks. We hiked in a tight line, Mark in front, then Sarah, then Leo, and me in the back. About 2 hours in, Leo stopped. "I need to tie my shoe," he said. "Keep moving, I'll catch up in 10 seconds. We kept walking for maybe 30 yards. Then we heard Leo's voice from behind us. "Hey, wait up, I found a shortcut through this ravine." We turned around. We saw Leo's orange jacket disappearing into a thicket of pine trees to our left. "Leo, wait! The trail is this way!" Mark yelled, and we chased after the orange jacket. We ran for minutes deeper into the brush until we reached a clearing. The orange jacket was sitting on a log, back toward us. "Leo, what the hell are you doing?" Mark reached out to grab his shoulder, but before he could touch him, a voice came from the trail behind us. "Guys, why did you run off? I was only gone for 10 seconds." We spun around. It was Leo, standing on the path we had just left. He looked confused and scared. We looked back at the Leo on the log.
The orange jacket began to sag. It wasn't a jacket. It was skin arranged to look like clothing. And when it turns around, it has no face, only a gaping hole, quivering in an attempt to mimic our laughter.
We ran. We didn't care about the trail anymore. We just ran until our lungs burned. We finally found a small cave to hide in as the sun began to set. We were terrified to speak. We knew that anything we said, it would learn. As the moon rose, the whispers started again, but they changed. They weren't just repeating us anymore. They were searching for our weaknesses. "Tyler, help me." It was my mother's voice. My mother had passed away 3 years ago. It was impossible, but the voice was so perfect, the way she dragged her S, the gentle rasp in her throat. "Tyler, I'm cold. I'm in the bushes. Please, come get me." I almost stood up. I almost walked out, but Sarah grabbed my hand. "It's not her, Tyler. Don't look. Don't listen." Then the voice shifted. It became Mark's voice. "Sarah, I'm right here, outside the cave. I went out to get wood and got lost. Please, shine your light so I can find you." We all looked at Mark. He was sitting right there with us, his eyes wide with horror as he heard himself pleading for help from the darkness. We waited for dawn. The thing outside the cave grew frustrated. It started making sounds that weren't human anymore. The sound of a deer being torn apart, the sound of a woman screaming, the sound of 1,000 birds taking flight. It was a cacophony of horror designed to break our minds. When the first light of morning hit the trees, we made a break for it. We didn't stop to pack our gear. We just ran toward the sound of the distant highway. The whistling followed us. It was right on our heels. Do, re, mi. As we burst out of the woods and onto the paved road, we saw a forest ranger's truck. We flagged him down, sobbing and screaming. The ranger looked at us, then looked at the tree line. He didn't ask questions. He just told us to get in the back and drive. As we pulled away, I looked back at the forest. Standing at the very edge of the shadows was a figure. It was wearing Mark's hat, a hat Mark had lost 2 days ago. It wasn't wearing it on its head. It was holding the hat in a long gray hand, waving it at us in a slow, mocking goodbye. The rangers never found anything. They said it was hallucinations caused by exhaustion. But I know what I heard, and I know why Mark doesn't whistle anymore. Sometimes in the Appalachians, the echo doesn't just return your voice, it keeps it, and it uses it to find its next meal.